Screenagers, welcome back. Got another episode of the Canon, your favorite movie podcast, the only movie podcast providing you with a watch list of the most essential movies ever made. We've got another great episode, another great movie lined up for you today. I am joined once again by the one and only Seth Vargas of the Movie Friends podcast. He's been on before, so I'm happy to welcome Seth back onto the show. You may or may not have heard our episode talking about The Outsiders, maybe a year and a half ago. But we're here today to talk about Buster Keaton's The General. Should be a amazing conversation. Very much so looking forward to it. Seth, welcome back. How's it going?
Hey, thank you very much. I was shocked to hear you say a year and a half because you had actually come on our show to discuss the bike riders. And I was like, certainly it hasn't been that long, but I guess it really has been. It's been a while. Yeah.
Yeah. Or maybe it was earlier this calendar year. Time,
It all, yeah.
it all bleeds together. Who knows what's what anymore?
Yeah,
It's
I'm
still
excited to be back.
2024.
Excited to be talking about Buster Keaton, one of my absolute favorite giants of early cinema.
It should be fun. I can't say that he's a favorite of mine. This has been a big blind spot for me, his whole filmography, but I'm happy that I was able to finally see one of his movies. We've had a running joke, I guess, between the two episodes that we've done together so far, where there's always an element of like greaser culture between the
That's
bike
right.
riders and the outsiders. I would say that this one kind of falls into it. There's a dude who really loves his mode of transportation. I assume there is some grease monkey sort of like work involved with what it is that he has to do. So I think we can say that we're continuing our greaser series.
100%. When you had asked me to do this and you said, this won't be about greasers, so it breaks tradition, I was like, yeah, that's true. But then as I was watching it, I was like, oh, dude, this is like the proto greaser movie because you've got a dude, there's a lot of things politically happening in the world, and he's just totally invested in, like you said, his mode of transportation. In fact, at one point, he actually rides a bike. Uh, it's the big wheel bike,
Yeah.
and he totally crashes it. And yeah, it's just his train and his lady, and that's his whole world, So I think that this, in a very ridiculous way, I think it still fits.
I think it totally fits. Before we dive a little deeper into the general and Buster Keaton and all that good stuff, I want to give you a chance to talk to us about your show, Movie Friends, just in case there's anyone listening who maybe didn't catch our Outsiders episode or is in some way not familiar with Movie Friends. Why don't you just give us a quick sort of overview of what it is that you guys do over there?
Well, I mean, that's impossible to find someone who's not familiar with the show Movie Friends. I mean, come on, this is like
It's the
the most
biggest show in the
popular.
world. Yeah.
Well, Joe Rogan was number one for a long time, and he's really sad that we have displaced him at the top. So Movie Friends is a show that I do with my friend Michelle. We've been friends for a really long time, and she has podcasted for a very, very long time, but hadn't watched a lot of movies. And I've watched a lot of movies, but had not podcasted before. And so we joined forces to create one team that doesn't do either very, very well. We pretty much,
but
yeah, we watch movies, and the slant of the show is that we don't try to agree, we don't try to disagree, we just kind of give our experience with the movie. We try to give a little bit of historical or cultural context, but it's about celebrating the journey of watching movies and loving them or not loving them, and it's all okay. We're not harsh if one of us really likes something or doesn't. It's not like the end of the show and the end of the you know our friendship. We want to be friends, and we want to find people who maybe they're just starting out their movie journey, and maybe the angry, pretentious gatekeepers of film are not for them. And so that's why it's called Friends too. We wanted to put that right into the title to just kind of express that's the point of the show. Yeah.
That's lovely. I love that. As one of the angry gatekeepers,
Yes,
I will
that's
say
right.
that um, it's hard to even to say that with half a straight face. But no, the show is great. I think it does really mirror that sort of vibe that you're getting at of it really is, a journey with friends, which is the fun part of watching movies. It's like kind of why all of us who are within the movie space of talking and writing and, making movies, are in it because we enjoy the journey of, going through all that stuff with friends. There's nothing more fun than like recommending a movie to a friend and then talking
Hmm.
about it afterwards. And, even if you disagree about it, you can have that friendly banter and engaging conversation. And I feel like that's totally what you guys are doing over there. I am a big fan. I like to
Oh,
consider
thank you.
myself a friend.
Amen. You are absolutely.
Is that what you guys call your fans? Friend
No,
heads?
we've we talked. I hate the idea. I and it's not like a false humility type thing. I just hate the idea of having fans. Like we say listeners or friends, or we fortunately can just call people by their name. We're like, hey, we got an email from this person, and we know who that person is. But yeah, we've talked about that because it's movie friends. So like MFers was thrown
Oh,
around.
nice.
Obviously, that's not the choice, but yeah, we
Yeah.
just stick with movie friends.
Just open every episode with welcome back, you MFers.
That's right. That's right.
All you MFers out there. Um, Amazing. Is there anything that you guys have done recently or have coming up for maybe the month of September that people should be on the lookout for?
Well, hey, if you live within 300 miles of Long Island, New York, you need to come out to our live show September 21st, Stony Brook University, Southampton campus. It's a free show. We're going to be talking about Space Jam. And folks, this is not just two people sitting there in chairs talking about a movie. No, this is a full, crazy, wild. There's props, there's songs, there's things being thrown at you. This is like if Gallagher had a movie podcast and also wasn't a weird person. So you got to come check that out. That's free. Details are on our website, moviefriendspodcast.com. And then we just came off of a month long break actually for August, and it was our most successful month ever. um,
It works.
so that was pretty cool. And then, yeah, just looking forward to getting back into the swing of things, literally into the swing of things. We're doing Swashbuckling September. And so we're going to be
Nice.
talking about some movies like Robin Hood, Pirates, Zorro, things like that. So,
Hell yeah. That sounds
yeah.
awesome. Also, the live show. That sounds amazing. I am within 300 miles of Long
You
Island, so
legally, I'm sorry, you're obligated to go.
I have to. I have to go. Maybe I'll come in like a journalistic capacity, and
Sure, yeah.
I'll write up a piece covering it for Screen Age Wasteland.
There you go.
Just
There you go.
yeah,
Get your gas
full.
receipts written off.
Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. But that sounds amazing. Anyone else who's in the area should definitely check that out. I will. I now need to make plans to attend. That sounds
There you
awesome.
go. I'll pick you up. Hey, send us out an email. Say, I don't have a ride. I
Yeah.
will come. I will pick you up. I will bring you there.
Amazing. Well,
Yeah.
I'll have a playlist ready and everything for the
There
car
you go.
ride.
There you
I
go.
love it. Or another way that we could get there, or that I could get there, is by train.
Oh, very good tie-in.
I could take the train there, like our good friend Buster Keaton in the General.
Johnny Gray.
Good old Johnny Gray. So, all right, to talk about the General itself, beyond trains, which I'm sure we'll talk about at length, because, gosh, who doesn't love trains?
Sure.
And this
Yeah.
movie is, this is top tier. If you're a train lover, this is like a number one kind of stuff.
Yeah. Yeah,
for
absolutely.
for sure. So, but before we get into that, because I assume we might have some listeners who are maybe not, totally familiar with Buster Keaton and his work and his background and his, just sort of like significance within film history, despite being, like you said, at the front end, sort of one of the titans of early American cinema. Seth, do you want to give us like a quick background on who he is, sort of how he got started, and like where this movie sort of falls into the overall timeline of his story?
Sure, yeah. So Buster Keaton is extremely influential. A lot of people know the name Charlie Chaplin, and rightfully so. Chaplin was a great, silent film star who did a lot of directing, just like Buster Keaton did.
Mhm.
For my money, I prefer Buster Keaton films. There's a big three that people talk about: Charlie Chaplin, Buster Keaton, and Harold Lloyd. Most people know Harold Lloyd from Safety Last or Safety First.
Mhm.
That's the one where he's like hanging on the clock. A lot of people know that one. And then Charlie Chaplin is obviously City Lights, The Kid, Gold. So the Gold Rush, a
Gold
lot of
Rush, yeah. Modern Times.
Modern Times, yeah. And Keaton, Chaplin did like a persona, right, which he called the tramp, and it's the dude
Mhm.
with the cane and the suit and the hat, and he's usually like a poor guy who's trying to make it through, right? Keaton's character was himself, but he did this thing. He was known for being completely stone faced. And
Mhm.
so even though all these wild things are happening around him, he just barely reacts to them. And it's so funny. Um, the General is not my favorite Buster Keaton movie. It's very, very, very impressive. The stunts with the
Mhm.
trains, crashing the train, all of the extras that they have for the different armies. It's very, very big, right? But to me, it doesn't have as many good like joke jokes like minute by minute. Um, but it's still very, very impressive. And so Keaton is kind of a master of expressing things visually in a way that almost, 100 years later down the road, you can watch this and understand things on such a just DNA level. The scene where he's under the table and he's getting kicked around by all the people who don't know that he's under there, and then the cigar burns the hole, and then he looks through. None of that needs like any dialogue or any explanation. There's no exposition really throughout
Mhm.
a lot of the scenes in the movie. Yes, we get cards that tell us, the Northern Army is now advancing as the Southern Army is retreating. Okay, okay. But for Buster's performance, you understand everything that's happening as it's happening, almost as if someone is telling you a joke that like you think you've heard before, while simultaneously thinking, why didn't I think of that?
Yeah.
So yeah, the General, he co-directed this one, and it did not do well. This was not like a huge massive financial success,
Mhm.
despite being like a bigger production. um and for stunt work especially, you know in stunt work you want realism. Anyone can throw a body down a ravine that doesn't look like a real body, right? And if we simply could see that and accept it and still take it as thrilling, stunt work probably wouldn't exist, right? But
Mhm.
you want to get things as close to real as possible. And if you're a fan of action movies and you're a fan of seeing people in peril, you need to go back and watch Buster Keaton films. Uh, it- Again, Chaplin, Harold Lloyd, they're doing very similar things, but there's just something about how Buster is able to, you know, jump through a window. He's like a shorter dude. Um,
Mhm.
jump through a window or like hop along the back of a train. It's so dangerous, while being so comical. Like at no point are
Yeah.
you sweating because of the stunts. The physicality is all part of like the humor. So yeah, definitely for you especially, you know, if this is the only one that you've seen, you got to check out some of the other ones because and I might be in the minority here, but I would not put the General towards the top for Buster Keaton's movies. I would
Hmm.
say if you love this, then the best is actually like still out there for you. So, and they're short, you know, they're short. You're
Yeah.
in, you're out, thrilling, hilarious. It's great. It's amazing.
It's good stuff. It's yeah, I feel like, so for me personally, this was my first Buster Keaton experience. But from what I've read, I think a lot of people agree that he definitely has funnier movies, movies that maybe feature some more thrilling or impressive stunts. Which isn't to say that like anything that's here is not impressive or,
Mm.
you know, amazing and great in terms of like what this movie is. I can't remember if there are any other Buster Keaton movies that we have within the canon, or if this is like the sole movie that represents like his entire filmography.
Hmm.
Um, I would have to double check that, but this does seem like a good sort of entry point for, you know, someone who is looking to get into silent films, someone who is looking to get into Buster Keaton and his work specifically. When you were talking about like his stunt work and the physicality and like the mix of physicality and comedy,
Hmm.
I feel like I'm definitely not the first person to make this connection, but like my brain quickly went to Jackie Chan as like
Yep.
the closest modern day example of someone who's doing something sort of similar to what we're getting here. So if you are a fan of Jackie Chan, if it's just from Rush Hour, like this is definitely something to check out. But then if you're also a fan of like Police Story or The Drunken Master, like some of his other work, like also definitely worth checking this out. And then I feel like the other modern example that we usually get for Keaton is Tom Cruise. I think just like Short King loves doing his own
Sure.
stunts, jumping through windows and all that stuff. I don't think Buster runs as much as Tom Cruise. Um, but just in case there's anyone out there who like needs like a modern frame of reference
Right.
for sort of like what he was doing, you know, almost or more than 100 years ago, which is
Sure.
pretty insane to think about, that this movie came out, you know, almost 100 years ago at this point, and so much of it is communicated to us in ways that like we can totally understand. Um, on
Yeah,
that,
absolutely.
I have a really weird take that I workshop from time to time, that we should have like 3 to 5 semi-major studios produce silent films every year, just
Hmm.
so like directors working today can really like hone in on their abilities to tell stories visually and not rely so much on characters communicating everything that needs to be communicated through a line of dialogue. I think some would be really good at it and others would probably struggle, but I feel like we would just sort of like, we would all grow as film viewers and makers if we just like gave ourselves that blanket rule.
Absolutely. I agree with that 100%. I think that every director should make two movies actually. One is a silent movie, and it doesn't need to be hard and fast, you know, 100% silent, but it should be silent centric. And two is a horror movie, because if you can learn how to communicate to people in those two ways, all of
Hmm.
your other movies are going to be, you know, great. And Ingmar Bergman, you know, he fits into you know, he did both of those. But like I would love to see like a Wes Anderson horror movie. I would love to see Paul
Yeah.
Thomas Anderson a horror movie. I would love to see a Spike Lee silent film. Like it, yeah, it's amazing when you start getting into silent movies, when you realize that there really is no lack. Like it's not, oh, I'm going to be missing something. No,
Mm-hmm.
absolutely not. So much of what's communicated is communicated with the eyes and with looks and with little glances. There's so many times throughout the general where Keaton just kind of goes, he does like a little head tilt, or like, you know, and it communicates everything that you need to know in that moment. It's really, really amazing. Yeah, I agree. And on your Jackie Chan note, it is the great equivalent, you know,
Mm-hmm.
for modern times, because Jackie Chan has expressed how his stunts aren't just supposed to be impressive to where you stand back and say, wow, what a cool guy. You're afraid for him because
Mm-hmm.
he is getting hurt throughout his movies. Like, it's not like he escapes everything and he's like, oh, brushes himself off. He's like, I'm fine. He gets hurt. He actually gets hurt. And so you feel something. And then there is like the comedic element to it. Keaton doesn't get hurt throughout his movies because so many of his stunts are involve him not really being aware of what's going on. Like, his character isn't fully
Mm-hmm.
aware. You know, when he stands there in the house, that super iconic shot that's been done a million times, when the house falls and, you know, he's just standing there and the window falls around him and he's not crushed to death. That's not him being like, all right, Gain, check this out. You know, and so many moments in the general, his character is just not paying attention. And
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
or, you know, he knocks a soldier out by like just like booping him on the head in like the ever so slightest way. But yeah, it's great. I agree. More silent movies. It shouldn't be something that's been, you know, left behind. And I think about great films, The Color of Pomegranates, or I did not like The Artist. I didn't
Mm-hmm.
like that one. I think it won Best Picture, I
I
believe,
think so.
which is insane to think about. But
Well, because
um,
that's the only silent movie we've gotten in the last 25 years.
yeah. So everything, and you know, the Coen brothers are such good. Um, they're so good at pushing themselves in new directions when no one has asked them to. And I think
Mm-hmm.
about No Country for Old Men and how there's no score in that movie. There's no
Mm-hmm.
music at all. And a lot of parts, there's lawn sequences with no dialogue. Everyone remembers, you know, the pit bull chase
Yeah.
down the river and, you know, blowing the gun out and shooting the dog, which is insane. But there's a lot of sequences in that movie that would fit right into a totally silent movie. And no one made them do that. No one asked them to do that. They pushed themselves to do it. And it made an incredible movie that was like a high watermark for movies for maybe since, I mean, maybe even till today. So, yes, bring back silent movies, 100%.
Yeah. I think we're two of maybe 10 people worldwide who are asking for more silent movies in 2024.
Yeah. Yeah.
But we will, this is the fight that we're going to continue fighting.
Absolutely,
We
absolutely.
will
Like
be
I
on the
said, you
front
know,
lines of this.
you can have a little line or two there. No, who cares? You know, throw in a, you know, it doesn't need to be a religious thing of like strict, absolutely no word. Who cares? But just watch this. I can't imagine watching this stuff and not being inspired.
Yeah.
Like watching the general and being like, oh, all you need is a train and a dude. The dude's got to be insane and very spry, but you know, it's thrilling. I get more.
Tom Cruise next Mission Impossible movie. Make it
Well,
silent.
I mean, if you want to talk about Tom Cruise, I would love for Tom Cruise to be in a low budget action movie where he's just doing this stuff,
Mm-hmm.
where we don't need all the bells and whistles to get to the big bike jump and the climbing the airplane. Just make it that. Just put all the budget into the stunts. Give us an hour and a
Mm-hmm.
half. It'd be the best movie he's ever made.
Yeah. Well,
Yeah.
Eyes Wide Shut still exists.
Oh, absolutely.
Marty, I know you're on, last legs of your career. Make a silent
Right.
movie before you go. Otherwise,
Absolutely.
the entire career, it's a waste.
Absolutely. I agree.
Yeah. All right. Back to the general. Well, actually, one last thing on what you were speaking about before when giving us the intro to Keaton and sort of the Keaton Chaplin sort of dynamic and the two on-screen personas of the tramp and whatever. I don't think Keaton's on-screen persona really had like a title or a name,
Yeah.
but sort of seen as being like a fairly consistent, if not like just like different variations of the same sort of character throughout his movies. The tramp is very much so a poor like person from a poor class. I don't even know, like maybe lower class we would call him. And Buster Keaton's sort of vibe was more working class,
Mm-hmm.
which I think there is like a bit of a distinction there. Although the two like do have a lot of similarities in that they're a lot of the shtick is that they're sort of like oblivious to everything that's going on around them. But I would say, and I can't speak to it obviously because I wasn't around in the 1920s when these movies were being made, but
Mm-hmm.
I feel like there was like maybe a bit more nobility in or seen in the Buster Keaton character because he wasn't just like an outright, tramp who
Right.
would go to any length to get out of like the insane poverty that he is. Like there's like a
Right.
nobility in being a working class person who is oblivious but still also shows us all of these incredible feats and abilities and what it is that he's able to do. So I don't know if you sort of like share those thoughts or
Yeah, I mean, in all of his movies, he's just a guy like with a job, you know.
mhm,
So here, he's like a train conductor, cameraman. He's a guy who's trying to be a cameraman. Steamboat Bill Jr. He's trying to be a boat captain. Sherlock Jr. Same, he's not necessarily like wealthy in all of
mhm,
the movies. His more popular movies, but he's not necessarily like a homeless guy like Chaplin is.
mhm. So yeah, so in the general, we've got Keaton as a train conductor. Do you think it's worthwhile to give a quick synopsis of what happens in this movie? I feel like
Sure. Do you want me to do it? You want to?
I need you, Seth. I need you to do
Okay, sure. All right. So Johnny Gray is a Southern. Don't ask me which state.
Georgia,
Georgia. Okay, so he is
the
a
greatest state in our
Southern
nation.
dude. He conducts a train. He loves his train, and the Civil War comes to his area, and so he loves this woman, Annabelle. Her brother and father go to sign up, and she expects Johnny to sign up as well. And so because he loves her, he's like, yes, I'm going to do it. He cuts in line, whatever. All right, I'm going to try to go faster. All right. So they do not accept him enlisting into the army because he is more valuable as a train conductor, which makes total
Mhm,
sense. He doesn't know
mhm.
that that's why. And so he tries to enlist. All this different stuff happens. Year later goes by, and Annabelle sees Johnny again, and he's like so ashamed that he's not in the army, and he happens to be conducting a train that she is taking to visit her dad who is injured. Unbeknownst to the two of them, the Union Army have hatched a plan to steal his train and use it
Wild.
to burn bridges to cut off supplies to the Southern armies. Okay. Johnny never really figures any of this out. All he knows is that his train and his lady are taken by I don't even know that he knows that it's the Union Army that does it.
He just knows that
Anyway,
someone stole his train.
right. So he tracks them down, finds Annabelle, hears this plan. Annabelle and him decide we need to get back to the Southern line to warn them about the army that's coming. They are successful. The Confederate Army
Saves the
is
day.
able
Say it.
to, yeah, the Confederate Army is able to stave off the attack from the Union, and Johnny is finally enlisted into the army, which is his dream as a lieutenant, and Annabelle finally loves him and respects him, and that's the movie.
He's got his train and he's got his lady at the end of the
Yep.
day. all
Yep.
he had to do was enlist in the Confederate Army.
Confederate. Yeah. Which, I
And
mean, look, who hasn't been there?
yeah, if you're telling me the only way to achieve my only two goals in life of having a sick ass train and having the woman of my dreams is by enlisting in the Confederate Army, I'm a rebel, you know? I broke Seth.
Oh man, I'm like lightheaded. Hey, I mean, look, you got to do what you got to do. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
The Confederacy only lasted for how many years? You know, not a long time, but
Yeah.
love and trains are forever.
Love and trains
That's
are
right.
indeed forever.
Yeah.
So that's the sort of narrative backdrop that this movie exists within. But, you know, like, or what I would assume most Buster Keaton movies, that's really just there to sort of highlight the great stunt work
Precisely.
that, you know, Buster wants to display within this movie. So, Seth, I don't know if you have like a favorite stunt that he does within this movie, a favorite sort of bit gag that happens. I feel like there are a few famous, memorable ones, but I'm curious to hear which one or one stood out to you in particular.
Yeah. So the image that you've probably seen from this movie is Buster on the front of the train, and he uses the one railroad tie to knock the other railroad tie out of the way of the train, like a foot away from the train hitting it. I think to me, and this isn't like a hard and fast rule, but to me, that's undeniably one of the most crazy things that I've seen somebody do.
Yeah.
Whether or not the train was in real danger of derailing, whether or not, you know, that other railroad tie had a little line attached to it and they could pull it
Yeah.
away. Just the physicality and how perfectly it's done. It's beautiful. Like the physics of it, it's very, very beautiful. There's a flow to that shot. um I was also very impressed this time around when he's trying to load the fence posts onto the train so that they have fuel, and he's throwing them on and he's not really getting them up, and then he throws one over the train and then throws one that knocks like three out.
Mhm.
And just that it's done like in one shot and in succession, like the amount of precision that you'd have to do those without cutting, like it's great. It's really, really amazing. And then the third shot that really impressed me, that I already kind of mentioned, when he's under the table and he looks through the burn in
Mhm.
the tablecloth and he sees Annabelle. That was really impressive to me because setting that up is so seamlessly done, but it's also so necessary for where the plot is going to go, because he needs to see that it's her. But we've already
Mhm.
established that he's under this table and he can't get
Yeah.
out, and no one can see him and he can't see anyone. And so I don't know that if I were sitting there writing this scene, if I would be like, oh, and then another thing that will happen that will hurt him, because it's a series of him getting hurt, is someone will
Mhm.
burn a hole and it will burn him. But then
Yeah.
we'll use that hole for him to see Annabelle. Like, working backwards, I can see how that was written. Starting out from zero, no idea. It's genius. It's like,
Yeah.
it's mind-bogglingly smart.
It's pretty amazing because it is like the setup is all like, okay, we're setting this up for joke, 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 joke.
Mm-hmm.
But then the punchline is like this huge emotional
Yeah.
piece of the movie, which
Yeah.
is pretty insane to have that be the punchline of like all of these joke setups that you're
Yeah. And you
doing
don't, yeah,
not
you don't
5 minutes
expect it.
before. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. And it's all so simple. Like I'm saying, oh,
Mhm.
I don't know how you could even think about that. It's so simple. All of the stunts, all of the jokes, all of the facial expressions, and none of it's complicated. communicating to us none of it's complicated, and
Hmm.
that's what makes these movies like such essential watches, not just for filmmakers but for film lovers. It's
Hmm.
essential to watch these things to see, oh, this is how simple it can be done.
Yeah. And that sort of, that bit of someone being under a table with folks all around the table talking and like knocking into them and stuff, that's a bit and a gag that we now have seen time and time again from
Sure.
countless movies, countless TV shows. It's like huge in every sitcom, it seems. And this might not be the first example of that, but as like an early example of that. But then, like you're saying, to also take it to like that next level where it also has all of these emotional stakes within the story
Hmm.
is pretty insane. And
Hmm.
although all of these things are communicated in a way that makes them seem pretty simple and obvious, it doesn't take away from how just like insanely impressive they are.
Hmm.
Um,
Yeah.
and I think one of the other great things about silent movies is for stunts like this to be set up. There's so much like intentionality that goes into the filmmaking itself. So right, just like the I want to say economy of not space, but of like actual
Yeah.
like film stock
Yeah.
that
Yeah.
you
Yeah.
need to have in terms of okay, we need to know how like where we're setting up the camera to capture this shot, and we only have but so many takes in order to get this really precise stunt to be done in a way that we can release into a movie. So like with those like fence pieces or whatever that he's knocking off, you know, who knows how many times that
Right.
was done before cameras were rolling. But then also to know that like we are only setting up one camera because it's 1925 and this shit is expensive and
Right.
we can't have four cameras and like we can't just like cover, shoot everything for coverage and then edit it together as needed on the back end or like fix it in post is another thing that I think a lot of like modern film fans and filmmakers can learn from because all of that stuff in terms of like setting up what you're doing on the front end for what you want in the final product goes such a long way.
Yeah, absolutely. I would love to be in a pitch meeting for this movie. Like, how do you express? And then I'm going to throw some fence posts, and it will be really funny. Like, because even as you and I are describing it, it doesn't match like the magic of watching him do all of these little things.
Mhm.
Um, and yeah, yeah. Did you have a favorite stunt or
I think the famous one of him on the front of the train with the
mm,
two, what do you call those things?
railroad tie? Usually,
Railroad ties?
yeah.
Okay, yeah. As someone who claims to be a big train fan, I don't know a lot of the proper vernacular. So I guess I'm a fraud in that regard. But yeah, that to me that was the most impressive. That might have been a moment where the meme of like the guy who like sits up in his chair when something happens in a
Yes.
movie. I
Yeah.
think I was
Yeah.
actually that guy. I
Yeah. Yeah.
think that
Yeah.
I actually did that when that occurred because I was expecting him to, you know, get off again and take that one off the same way that he did with the first.
Hmm.
And my mind was totally blown by both like the precision, the accuracy, the like thought of the character in that moment to do that. The thought of Keaton to like want that to be the stunt instead of just him like picking up like railroad tie after railroad tie.
Right.
Like that's like not as engaging for viewers. So I was like, yeah, I was totally blown away by that little bit.
It's amazing because, like you said, he does it the first time in a way that makes sense. He hops off the
Mhm.
train, runs forward, grabs it. So he establishes this is how you can do it. And then the
Mhm.
next time he does it, it's 100 times more insane. Where if he
Yeah.
was standing, at his conductor post and he was just like knocking things off from there, you would think as the audience, oh, well, conductors must do this all the time. This is a normal thing, right? it's not. And it's so smart to give you like the 1-2 punch, where the one punch is kind of like light and then the second punch is like a total knockout.
Yeah.
And it's stood the test of time, and it's, you know, it's used in compilations of amazing moments from film history. The other one I wrote down in my notes, when Annabelle turns him down and she's like, the next time I see you, you better be in uniform. And he sits down on the bar between the train wheels,
Hmm.
and it
Oh
starts to
yeah.
move, and he moves up and down. I wrote, this is an eternal image.
Yeah. It it really is. It's and again, it's just like, it seems very simple, but it does communicate so much,
Mm-hmm.
while at the same time just like looking awesome, you
It
know.
looks, yeah, it looks awesome. Yeah. And
And
it's
sometimes that's all
real. It's
movies need to
real.
do. Sometimes a
Yeah.
movie just needs to like look a little awesome. And I mean, it all being real, right? I think that's something that we marvel at all the time as film fans, of, you know, who doesn't love walking out of a movie with friends and saying, you know, they actually did that. You
Right.
know, he was actually tied to that train or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
Or like that speedboat really did crash into the, you know, side of that building,
Right. Right. Right.
you
Right.
know. It
Yeah.
was,
Spoiler alert for Alien Romulus. So skip ahead. You know, I'll keep
yeah.
this to 15 seconds. But just today, they put out the video that like the big creature at the end of Alien Romulus was a guy in a suit, and everyone's like mind is being blown. They're like, wait, that was not CGI. Like that was
Yeah.
real. Like, and it, for me at least, I was like, oh, I feel differently about that now.
Yeah.
And like Nolan for Tenet was like, I'm gonna actually drive an airplane into a building. And you watch it, and at least for me, it just doesn't have the same, because in a movie that's so full of effects, it's hard to tell what's real and what's not. Where with Keaton, it's all and obviously there's still camera trickery, there's still setups,
Mhm.
there's still stuff, but we know that he's at least physically there with a train. There's not a green screen.
Yeah. And that
Yeah.
makes it all, you know, that does go a long way for a viewer to know that what they're watching is someone, you know, fully pushing themselves in, you know, his form of artistry, which is and was stunt work. Like
Mm-hmm.
that is his, you know, sort of creative avenue. And to know that he is like fully pushing himself to entertain us in that regard, it does go a long way for for the viewer. I do want to ask you a little bit about just sort of like how things are set up, sort of like visually, in terms of just like camera work uh, and things like that within this movie, because like we said with silent movies, there's so much like intention that a filmmaker and like crew needs to have when, you know, making these movies, because there was so much less available to them in terms of how they were able to create effects and like make things appear on screen. And I feel like this movie goes a really long way in like communicating to us both like the geography of where it takes place, and like how the characters are then like interacting with it. So when like later in the movie, when Keaton does something or his character is going somewhere, we've already been given all of the information that we need to like understand what it is that's happening.
Oh yeah, absolutely. Well, rewatching this, so this would probably be the fifth time.
Oh
I
shit.
watched this twice for this, so it's probably like the fifth time that I watched it. And watching something and rewatching something and then watching something to talk about it, it's such a different experience.
Hmm.
Like, you know, this time around, I wrote down every single card that had words on it. You know, you don't
Mhm.
do that stuff when you're just watching something for enjoyment, right?
Yeah.
But what I was struck by this time around was how simple everything is. And for someone who like lives in the United States, you understand that there's the North and the South. There's two colors. There's two outfits. Even though we're doing a little bit of like costume switching and uniform switching between different characters, everyone's look is very easily identifiable. We only have, I mean, how many like main characters are there in this movie? Like 5, maybe.
Yeah, maybe.
When you see the brother again, you recognize him. When you see the father
Mhm.
again, you recognize him. One of the great benefits to making silent films is you don't have to worry about noise. And so there is no like, all right, everybody be quiet now. Everybody
Mhm.
who's on set can be talking and the train can be going, and there's just no consideration for that. And so even though the cameras were not as mobile, there's just so much more freedom to like move around, and you just don't take any of that into account. Like people can be there and yelling and throwing things, and you don't have to worry about hearing them, and
Mhm.
it make it into the final thing. And that's another aspect. If anyone listening has ever been on any type of film set, that is one of the most infuriating and mind numbing parts of filming. Is okay, everybody be quiet now. And it's like, oh man, oh man, oh man, it really like grates on your nerves.
Mhm.
But yeah, they do such a good job in this movie of communicating so much, even just with, like I said earlier, just like little nods, little looks. And there's some stuff. Obviously this is a movie about the Civil War, and so we're talking about the Confederate Army. It's so odd to be in a place where we're like rooting for them, and it's like, yes,
Mhm.
please, Johnny Gray, get back to the Southern line
Yeah.
so you can warn about the advancing Northern Army.
Those damn
And
Yanks.
yeah, and so there's that part of it, and then there's also a few moments where Johnny Gray like chokes Annabelle. And it's done in like a comedic
Yeah.
way, but it's very very shocking to like see that as someone
Mhm.
who like lives in this century. And I'm like, oh wow. um I still think that a lot of those jokes like work, quote unquote, but it's a lot to kind of
Yeah.
um take in and be like, is this funny or is this not funny?
Yeah. No, that is um it's a hard thing to sort of like grapple with. Like, does this work within the context of this story
Yeah.
that I'm watching? It is, I think any movie that we watch, whether it's, within the canon or not, we're going to watch it through like the lens of the current day that we are watching it in, both like globally and on our own personal levels. Like a lot
Yeah.
of times, like when we watch a movie and don't vibe with it, it's just because like you had a bad day or something and it just
Mm-hmm.
like wasn't the right time for you to watch a movie. So you like, right, you watch it through the lens of whatever current day circumstances it is that you're in, but then also trying to like understand it within the context that it originally came out in or like was released in. So, right, watching something like this where it's originally released in 1926, that
Mm-hmm.
is a lot harder for us to sort of like understand the context of that time and place, as
Right.
opposed to rewatching something, like a couple weeks ago we had an episode on There Will Be Blood. So like trying to understand the context of 2007 is a lot easier than
Sure.
trying to
Sure.
understand the context of uh of 1926, but still like coming at it with our own 2024 thoughts.
Yeah, it's tough. And I mean, for me, as someone, like I said, I love Buster Keaton. I would put him, everyone always talks about like, oh, the Mount Rushmore of movies. And to me, movies are too big. It's too big for Mount Rushmore anymore. Like, I'm sorry. Like, yes, you can have a Mount Rushmore of presidents because there's been 45 of them, 46. You know how many movies there have been? You know how many movie directors there
Yeah,
are? You
there
know
were
what I'm saying?
47
It's
movies last month.
exactly. Yeah, today released just on Netflix and Tubi.
Yeah.
But like, it's a silly thing, I think, to try to reduce films down to any number lower than like 500. Genuinely,
Hmm.
that's not me trying to be like pretentious or ruin people's fun or yuck people's yum. You can't pick four. You just can't do it. But Buster Keaton would maybe be close to mine in the context of film history, right?
Hmm.
And so, as someone who loves him and pushes his stuff, I also don't mind being like, this is a really weird movie that he probably made uh in a way that I don't agree with at all. Like, I don't agree with making the Confederate Army like sympathetic, and even though his character is motivated by like this woman, and he's
Hmm.
motivated by like not really being involved so much for at least
Yeah.
part of the movie. At one point he's literally like waving the Confederate flag, but
Yeah.
I don't mind saying like I don't agree that this was the right thing to do even in 1926, while also saying that this is a good movie. Like, someone can be of a different opinion and mind than me and still make good things. And I know that that's very upsetting for people to hear, but I'm sorry, it's true. um,
No
it's
one's
just the way
allowed
that.
to for me. No one's allowed to. Yeah. If you want to make something good, for me, it has to be totally in line with what I would do. Even though I've never seen a
Absolutely,
movie and I don't know,
that's
I wouldn't
true.
know the first thing about turning on a camera, but
Right.
I'll still be the
But
first to tell you.
yeah. So it's not something that I think we need to deny or hide behind or make excuses. um he could have made this movie one way and he didn't. He made it another way, and if that's a
Hmm.
deal breaker for you, don't watch the movie and don't watch his movies, and that's all there is to it.
I think it is an interesting. Let's stay on this topic for a little bit because it is super interesting. I think for me, for one, right. So I think I've mentioned it on this episode, but this was my first time watching this movie, and I also was coming to it without really any like prior knowledge of the movie or what it was about. I just knew Buster Keaton, one of the greatest filmmakers of all time, like OG stunt performer, absolutely
Hmm.
great. He does stuff with trains. Like, I'm in, and I'm watching it. And I'm like, oh, this is about the Civil War. Like, I did not know that this was a Civil War movie. And then after watching it and doing a little bit of research for this episode, coming to find out that this movie was based on a book that is
Yes. Yeah.
based on a true story of a very similar, if not like exact event occurring during the
Yeah.
Civil War,
Mhm.
where some Union Army members, attempted to steal a train to, then bring back to the North. And I think their plot was to like burn bridges or something along the way to cut off supplies to the actually, Seth, I think you told me this before we started recording, but to cut off supplies to the Southern troops. And that book was written by one of the Union soldiers who was like part of the plan to carry this whole thing out. And similar to this movie, it didn't work out for them. They were caught, and I think some of them were hanged, but then the surviving members were like some of the first to ever receive the U.S. Medal of Honor. So,
Hmm.
kind of like an interesting moment in U.S. history that's within like a larger, like really interesting moment within U.S. history that is the Civil War. Um, Also, like very odd to think about the Civil War and like its place within cinema history because for it being like one of the most significant things to ever occur in this country, there is really like there is a very sort of weak pool of movies about this period in American history. Whereas like you think about World War II and we like could not have any more movies about that war, it seems. Um, the reasons for that are probably because it's like easier for us to think about the implications of that war than it is for us to think about the implications of the Civil War.
Hmm.
Probably also why
Hmm.
it's just like not discussed in American society like at
Right.
large. Uh,
Right.
so
Well, we can't even agree on why the Civil War started, Americans, but we can
yeah,
all agree, at least we could for a long time, that Nazis are bad. And that's why there are 200,000 World War II movies.
yeah. Well, right, because like the Civil War, because it happened here, it's like, and because I don't even want to say it's like more complicated than World War II at face value is like really easy. Like Nazis are bad. We beat
Yeah.
Nazis and that was sick. Let's make a movie about that.
Right.
Whereas with this movie, it's like, or with this war, um, I think most of us, if not all Americans, can say, yeah, slavery, like not the coolest thing. We
Right.
should beat that in the same way that we beat Nazis.
Right.
But because it was something that was like so close to home, a lot of, maybe not a lot of, but like some Americans are maybe not as quick to come to that conclusion as
Right.
we are about the importance of beating Nazis.
Right.
Um, so all of this is just like a super roundabout way of me saying that I was interested to see that this movie was set during the Civil War and that it took that true story and instead of telling it like the book does from the perspective of the Union soldiers, Keaton decided to tell it from the perspective of a Confederate soldier because he was of the mindset that the American viewing public would not want to see a movie that frames Yankees or Union soldiers as heroes, which
Right.
is a funny thought in both 2024 and 1926. But
Right.
when you think about it within 1926, this is 11 years after Birth of a Nation came out. This
Right.
is what, 8 years before Gone with the Wind came out. So like it makes sense when you like think about like where sort of like the viewing public was at that particular time. But it is still kind of funny to think that that was ever the case for
Yeah.
for us as a viewing public.
Yeah.
And maybe I'm using us a little loosely there.
Well, you and I are also speaking as like New Yorkers, you know what I'm
Yeah.
saying? And so for us, we were not raised, uh, people in the South, I don't know if they still do. I can't speak to that, but I know that in recent times, the war was called the War of Northern Aggression. Like that's how it was.
Yeah.
We call it
Yeah.
the Civil War. It was called no. It was the North that was very aggressive, and they came in and took stuff from us, and that was not cool. Um, and adding in the element of the book again. If you're listening to this, I'm not trying to make excuses. I'm not trying to do workarounds to enjoy this movie.
Mhm.
But if you look at it and you're Buster Keaton making this movie, you can't end it with you getting hanged. You know what I mean? You have to be like,
Mhm.
oh, okay. So if I'm the hero of the movie, or if I make it out alive, it has to be told from the perspective of the dude who stopped the train robbery, and that's me.
Mhm. Yeah. The
Yeah.
the workaround for that is like changing the ending and you get away with the
Well,
with
he
the train
wasn't going the
robbery.
Quentin Tarantino route. He didn't want to rewrite
Yeah.
history
He
at
didn't want
that
to go
point.
full
Yeah.
revisionist history.
Right.
But
Right.
right, like these are all sort of like interesting questions of both the like morality of the movie, but
Mm-hmm.
also of just like storytelling, right? Like did Buster Keaton only choose to switch the framing because he like wanted it to be a story that ultimately ends heroically, and like two is the thought of having the main character be something of an underdog, a more compelling like narrative component, or was he like maybe like a little bit like, yeah, the South will rise again, right?
Yeah.
Like we will
Could be
never
all
know,
three.
but
Yeah.
it could
Yeah.
be, yeah, it could be some sort of
Yeah.
combination of all of them. We don't know how to divvy up that pie chart.
Yes. Absolutely.
So how do we transition from this portion of the conversation? So you've seen this movie 5 times, which
Yeah.
what was your first time seeing it? Have you like always been a Keaton fan? Was this your first Keaton movie? Had you seen
No.
others prior? Well, Screenagers, unfortunately, we lost the initial final third of this recording due to some moronic technical issues on my part. So Seth and I are going to go through once again the final sort of portion of this conversation that we've been having about the general. So I apologize in advance for one, this wonky sort of transition from the last bit of audio that you heard, and two, I apologize if we are repeating ourselves in any way in terms of like things that we've already stated on this episode. We are coming back to this recording several days later. So,
I think it's great. If you're talking about Buster Keaton, a dude who, made his bread and butter out of accidents and, things hurting him, what better episode to have a total accident happen on?
yeah, it's kind of perfect when you put it that way. If you are able to put a positive spin on things. I was not approaching this with that same sort of positive can-do attitude, but Seth, that's why I'm happy to have you here for this particular episode. So I think where we cut off was we were trying to awkwardly transition from discussions of this movie being spun through the prism of being like pro-Confederacy
Right.
and all of that. And I was
the
asking
listeners
you,
are going to miss that perfect segue. Sorry, everybody. You won't be able to hear it. We handled it so deftly. It wasn't awkward. We solved all the problems of like latent racism in America.
yeah.
It was pretty amazing, honestly. Now we just get this, but it's okay.
It's lost in the ether.
Yes.
We had, all of the ills of the world sort of solved within whatever audio files have been lost, and unfortunately we're not able to recover.
It was the episode that they didn't want you to hear.
Yeah, I'm not saying that the Clintons hacked into my computer and deleted it because it would disrupt whatever secret cabal of world domination that they have, but
it could, you never know.
That could have been what happened, JFK, the second shooter, grassy knoll, all that stuff.
That's right.
But instead of diving into all of my favorite conspiracy theories, what we were trying to do, Seth, was transition from that conversation to your first experiences with Buster Keaton, your first movie of his that you watched, or sort of like how you became familiar with his work, if you can remember that.
Sure, yeah. I came to Buster Keaton in a really weird way. My mom was a big fan of the movie Benny and June from the early 90s, which was like more like a romantic dramedy than a comedy, more so on the drama side of things. And in it, Johnny Depp plays a guy named Sam who is like obsessed with Buster Keaton and Charlie Chaplin. And when his character is introduced, he's actually riding into town on a train and he's reading a Buster Keaton book. And so I knew that name, and I knew Depp in that movie recreates some famous Chaplin and Buster Keaton little like pratfalls and different things that they would do. So that was like my introduction to it. And because we watched that movie a lot growing up, I was familiar with it. Side note, check that movie out if you want a good slice of early 90s movies and Johnny Depp doing Buster Keaton stuff. And then my wife had bought me a Charlie Chaplin movie set at some point after getting married. And I watched them and they kind of freaked me out. There was just something so odd to me about the way that they looked and like the makeup. It was like unsettling. And then when I decided to get back into silent film, I started with Buster because I knew that name and was just like totally bowled over.
I love it. So this was what, like the third, fourth of his movies that you ended up seeing?
Probably. I had put this one off a little bit. I'm not like an anti-train guy, but I was just like, no, like
How could
I'm
you?
not genuinely. But I was just
Definitely,
like,
yeah.
oh, okay,
The train hive would come for you.
right, yeah. But like, it was like, oh, a Buster Keaton train movie. That didn't have me like rushing to press play, you know.
Yeah.
So yeah,
Um. Okay. Cool. So I think this would be the portion of the episode where I ask you if there were any other topics of conversation about the general that we didn't bring up that you wanted to bring up, but because our initial recording was so long ago, I don't know if we'll actually remember everything that we did talk about and
got it. Okay, yeah.
anything else that you would want to talk about. I think we
I
hit
think
on everything though.
I think if I recall, I did just want to give a shout out to Marion Mack, who plays Annabelle Lee. Yes, as we already discussed, like she's pretty much just there to be saved, and
Mm-hmm.
but she is comically matching Buster Keaton in this. She's really, really funny throughout this, and she does get to do some stunts. Um, if I recall, last time we did this, I mentioned how she gets put into the sack
Yeah.
and she's thrown on the train, and then like a crate is thrown on top of her, which
Yeah.
obviously, you know, they didn't actually throw a crate on top of her. And then just how amazing that whole gag is, because Buster grabs the sack and empties it
Mm-hmm.
out, and it's full of shoes, which is like there's never in the history of the world been a sack of shoes like ever. And it's so odd when he empties it out, but you're like, okay, whatever. So he puts her in it, and then he trips and his own shoe falls off. So then he has to look through the pile of shoes that did not exist prior to emptying the
Yeah.
sack out. And it's like, it's the biggest, like, I'm going to create a problem that doesn't exist to have a payoff for a joke that only could work if this impossible thing
Yeah.
happens. And it's so stupid. Like, it might be the stupidest joke in this movie, but it's so funny. Like, I don't blame him for like shoehorning this whole
Yeah.
idea in.
No, it's amazing. It's almost like the dumber a setup for a joke can be, like the
Yes.
better the payoff is, the better the punchline is. Like
Yes, absolutely.
the setup
Absolutely.
is just, hey, there's a
Well,
sack of shoes and we emptied it out. And the payoff is now he has to look for a shoe in this pile of shoes.
right.
Isn't that silly?
I
It's
love
amazing.
dumb setups for jokes. Have I ever told you my joke about the farmer?
No, I don't think so.
What did the farmer say when he tasted the stalk vegetable that he grew in his basement?
I don't know.
Tastes celery.
Okay.
Get it? Because he grew the celery in his basement, and
Yeah.
another word for basement is cellar.
Yeah. That's
Okay. I came up with that joke as I was cutting like 20 pounds of celery.
Where is it? You know what? I don't have a laughing sounder on my soundboard. So I think we'll just have to.
I'm not surprised that you didn't feel the need to preload laughter when talking to me. Yeah.
Yeah, no, it's not just you. There's enough preloaded laughter within us.
Yeah.
That is a great joke that we didn't get the first time around. So
there you go. Things
I
happen
mean,
for a reason.
yeah, silver lining.
Yeah. So anyway, all that to say, Marion Mack
Yeah,
as Annabelle. Yeah, she deserves a shout out and recognition for her.
she absolutely does. Seth, I think the only other thing that I wanted to bring up that we maybe didn't get to before was, and I don't even know how to like really circle back to this in any sort of decent way, so I'm just gonna jump right into it. But the bit where, or not the bit, but the like epic set piece of crashing the train into
Yeah.
that is that like a gorge, or like what do we call that body of water? Is it a ravine of some sort? What do
Yeah,
we?
it's not quite a river. It's
Yeah,
bigger than a creek.
there's. You're not a big train guy. I'm not big on names of bodies of
Right.
water. um, but just like a silly piece of trivia about that train that they did end up crashing, which is like, for 1926, like that is part of an like amazing spectacle that this movie is.
Yeah.
It doesn't, when you're watching it through the 2024 lens, you think like whatever, that's nothing. But for that time and for like a long time after, that was one of the most impressive big epic moments within an already like big epic movie. Probably was like the inspiration for the climax of Bridge Over the River Kwai,
Sure.
and
Sure.
like Good, the Bad, and the Ugly, and all that stuff. But the funny piece of trivia around that is, after they filmed that crash, they were just like, we're gonna leave this train here because
Yeah. Yeah.
because whatever, we don't have the money to like pull it out of this not river, not creek. And it stayed there for 15 years, and then it was pulled out of that body of water. Also hilarious that 15 years after this movie came out, the US was in World War II, so they pulled the train out
Right.
to melt it down for like parts for ammunition, to use the metal for ammunition. So, which is just like hilarious on so many different levels, to think
Right.
about this movie coming out before World War II, which like now seems like ancient history to us. Uh,
Right.
all that, yeah, just a ton of like very funny things happening within like one single piece of trivia.
It's funny that, they weren't concerned about the environment or anything like that, but they were like, hey, we need metal. And they're like, we know where to get that. There's
Yeah,
a whole bunch of metal just sitting there.
you guys ever see that Buster Keaton movie?
Right. Yes.
Yeah, we can use that. And
They should have put his face onto the bullets.
yeah, yeah,
Yeah. Like how they would sign the bombs and stuff.
yeah. That's not weird at all.
No, no, totally cool. Totally cool
Yeah,
thing to do.
yeah. A very just like chill, normal message from Buster Keaton to all those darned Nazis out there.
Tell him
train
Buster
bullets were
sent
killing.
ya.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I think that's enough of that. We got our final pieces about the movie out of the way. I think that means that we're ready for some recommendations and final goodbyes before we wrap this puppy up. So, Seth, if you can remember the recommendations that you had for the general, I will run through our rules for recommendations quickly, to hopefully give you some time to bring those back up to memory. So, for every movie that we introduce into the canon, we also like to recommend things to check out if you like said movie. Of those three things, at least one has to be another movie. The other two things, however, can be any and everything else. It can be more movies. It could be a TV show. It can be a book. It can be an album or a band. It could be a video game, a board game. It could be a painting, a restaurant. Really, like the list goes on. We like to get super weird, super creative. The connections to the movie can be as loose or on the nose as we like. And any movies that we recommend can't be movies that are already in the canon. Like I said before, I don't know if there are any other Buster Keaton movies in the canon, so those should be fair game. And we stick to three, so three and only three. Sometimes folks come in and they like to do a 2-for-1 or something, and end up recommending five things when we really have to stick to three. So, with all of that being said, Seth, do you remember your first recommendation for the general?
I think I do, honestly. I think I remember all three of them, and I might even remember them in order. So here we go. We kind of referenced this earlier. I just wanted to shout out the book Cameraman by Dana Stevens. It's a very, very interesting read. If you're interested in Buster Keaton, but also just if you're interested in the history of technology in America and how like Buster and like film theaters and filmmaking literally were like born at the same time and came up together, and how he helped propel filmmaking forward. And again, folks, I'm sorry if you've already heard me say this, but one of the reasons why I love film so much is because uh, it's a very obviously there's international film all over the world, but the story of film is like so tied in with the story of America. And as each technological jump has been made, film has been making it along with industry and society. It's very interesting. So if any of that interests you, Cameraman by Dana Stevens, check it out.
That sounds awesome. I will certainly be adding that to my reading list. Nice. I dig it. So all of my recommendations are going to be train related in some way or another, because this is obviously one of the great train movies. The
Right.
history of film seems to be super tied together to trains. Most of the best movies have scenes that feature trains. Most movies that feature trains will like probably kick at least a little bit of ass. So
Yeah, absolutely.
I'm not just recommending movies, but I am recommending three things that are somewhat train related in one way or another. The first thing that I'm recommending is a live album from an artist who is kind of hit or miss depending on where you fall.
Mm-hmm.
Some people might say they're more miss than hit. But for me, I think that the hits really do hit. I think that this act is extremely talented. Like I'm just gonna say, like, this guy is one of the best guitar players of all time.
Sure.
And one of the best examples of that is his live album, Where the Light Is, John Mayer, featuring the track, of course, Stop This Train, because Buster Keaton in The General, after his train gets stolen by those pesky Union soldiers, all he wants to do is stop it and get it back, just like our boy John Mayer. So Where the Light Is, the live album, some of John Mayer's best work, maybe his best work. If you find him to be like kind of cringeworthy as a whole, this one live album might be like the one place where you can listen to him and like really appreciate how talented of an artist he is. So that's my first recommendation.
I thought you were going to say the album Drops of Jupiter by Train.
I can't say I was ever a big Train the band guy. Not for me.
Yeah.
I could have gone Crazy Train.
Oh, sure.
Or something.
Yeah.
But is that just Ozzy, or is that
I believe that is Ozzy after Black Sabbath. Yeah.
Okay.
Yep.
Yeah. I was never a big Black Sabbath or Ozzy guy. So just a John Mayer bro,
That's right. That's okay. Somebody has to be.
Yeah. Cool. What's your second recommendation?
Okay, so my second recommendation is going to be a movie, and it is going to be another Buster Keaton movie.
Nice.
I'm going to recommend a movie that I mentioned 100 times on here already, which is Sherlock Jr. It's from 1924. It's 45 minutes. And it's just unreal. It's unbelievable how good it is in such a short amount of time. And it's not just funny. There's some really interesting camera effects that are done that I'm still like, how did they do that back in 1924? It's 100 years old at this point. It's about a film projectionist who wants to be a detective, which describes, how many movie lovers out there, right?
Yeah.
So, yeah, Sherlock Jr., definitely check it out. I think it's my favorite of his. So
amazing.
Yeah. And it's 45 minutes.
Yeah. I mean, knock that out, nice morning with your morning coffee.
Absolutely.
Watch some Buster. Sounds like a great way to start the day, or on the day, or spend time in the middle of the day.
That's
whatever you fancy.
Take a long bathroom break at work.
Yeah. And watch it on your phone the way it was intended to be viewed. Don't do that, actually. Watch it on a TV, at least. Awesome. So For my second recommendation, I'm going to go with something kind of strange. And I'm not going to recommend a TV show, but I'm going to recommend a character from a television show, which I don't believe has ever been done. I don't think anyone's ever recommended a character because it's kind of a silly thing to recommend. Like, where you like you're just gonna like watch the episodes with that character,
Sure.
whatever. Fine. This movie, like we've stated, is about a dude who loves nothing in the world more than his train. Great character from TV history who seems to love nothing more than his train, despite everything that is going on in the world around him. I'm talking about The Sopranos. I'm talking about the one and only Bobby Bacala. Great character. All he wants to do is mess around with trains, and instead he has to do mob stuff, you know?
Yeah.
It's so annoying. Sometimes you want to do train stuff and there's a civil war going on. Other times you want to do train stuff and you got to, be in the mob.
It's true.
It's annoying, but
Yeah.
these guys, they rose to the occasion and they did
Right.
what they had to do so
Right.
that they could just embrace their love of trains.
Yeah. Hey, sometimes you got to do what you got to do.
What's your number 3?
Okay, so my number 3 is going to be music. This is a band that I've been listening to a lot lately. And their debut album was a 3-volume album. They released it in 3 volumes. So I'm not going to recommend all 3 because, like you said, some people try to shoehorn in a bunch of stuff. The band is called Mo 75. That's MO and then the number 75, all one word. I would recommend volume 1 or volume 3, but all of them are great. Their whole discography is awesome. They also put out in 2023, they put out 5 albums one week after another. So like
wow,
50 songs all within 5 weeks. It's totally insane.
Yeah.
But yeah, check it out. It's really good. Like, kind of easy rock, but with some grungier sound, I guess I could say, but a lot of melody. It's good. It's good, like driving around music or like throw on at the barbecue music.
Sweet.
Yeah.
I feel like the last time we were doing this, you mentioned or described them as sort of like post-punky garage rock kind of vibes.
Yes, but mixed with like dad rock.
Yeah, and I think I said they sound like the coolest version of Weezer.
Yeah,
or the cooler version of Weezer.
So the dude who like heads up that band, Matt Farley, I am constantly, if you follow me online, I'm constantly sharing his stuff. He's written, recorded, and published over 25,000 songs on Spotify under various bands and pseudonyms. Amazing story, incredibly inspiring, all around insane dude. It's amazing.
He's a doer
Absolutely. Yes.
In the pure sense. Awesome. That's amazing. Is he part of this band?
Yes. Yep.
Okay. Awesome. I will have to check them out. That sounds very cool. For my final recommendation, I'm kind of happy that the audio got lost because I didn't enjoy the third recommendation that I gave the first time around. So I'm going to switch things up.
Wow. A do-over.
Which, that only means something to the two of us because no one else knows what the other recommendation was. But I'm going to recommend a movie, and a movie that has a prominent scene on a train. Something pretty traumatic happens, kind of similar to our Johnny Gray character here, where you can say that his experience with his train being stolen and his girl being kidnapped, we can say that that's traumatic for him. So something very traumatic happens to someone on a train, surrounding a train, in M. Night Shyamalan's from 2000, Unbreakable.
Wow.
Great movie, great opening scene, great train scene, pretty traumatic stuff, and that really kickstarts the rest of the narrative.
Yes. One survivor.
Yeah.
Yes. Mr. Glass waited.
There are recommendations. Seth, before we get out of here and say final goodbyes, do you want to just run through quickly, boom, 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 all three of the recs for anyone who maybe didn't get to write them down the first time around?
Absolutely. Number 1, Cameraman by Dana Stevens. Number 2, Sherlock Jr. by Buster Keaton. And number 3, Mo 75, Volume 1 or 3 from the band The Big Heist.
Amazing. I've got number 1, the live album Where the Light Is by John Mayer. Number 2, the great character from The Sopranos, Bobby Bacala. And number 3, M. Night Shyamalan's Unbreakable. Seth, thank you again for joining. This has been an absolute blast of an episode. Listener, I hope it wasn't too jarring listening to this.
When I told that joke about celery, I hope that you...
That was the moment they were out. They were like, all of this like re-recording stuff, that's fine. But celery jokes, that's
too far.
That's where people draw the line.
Yep.
But no, seriously, Seth, this has been an absolute blast. Hopefully we don't have to do it a third time.
I'm all right. I'll do it. That's all right.
Where can people find you? Where can they find movie friends? All that good stuff. Where can we find you online?
Absolutely, yeah. The best place to find us is at our website, moviefriendspodcast.com. You can also follow us on Twitter and Instagram, Movie Friends Podcast. You can follow me on Twitter at Osethy. That is OHSETHY. And that's pretty much the only place that I'm really like online. And yeah, check it out. We put out new episodes all the time.
Amazing. Well, I can say that Seth is a great follow on Twitter. Also a really good follow on Letterboxd if you're into that.
Oh yeah,
Movie right. Friends is a great listen. Also great follow on, whatever platform. Definitely give them a like and subscribe on, whatever platform it is that you listen to your podcasts. It's probably whatever platform you're listening to us on right now. So if you're liking what you're hearing, make sure that you smash that subscribe button for us as well. I can't believe those words just came out of my mouth. But
it's all right.
That's the deal. We're here. So yeah, check us out. We have got new episodes coming out allegedly every Wednesday, except for this one because of the technical issues. But otherwise, you can catch us on your feed every Wednesday talking about new movies. You can catch us as well on the website proper, screenagewasteland.com. We've got tons of great articles coming out there. Every Monday, you've got To Be Movie of the Week. Tuesdays, you've got Rom-Com Rewind. Wednesdays, hopefully, you've got episodes of the Canon. Thursday, you've got Canon articles. Every Friday, you've got Fear Flashback with Bob. Tons of great other articles and lists coming out in the meantime, in between time, all that good stuff. We recently did a ranking of best Tom Cruise movies, which is, I will say, interesting to say the least in terms of how those results shook out. But there's so many other great things to check out on the website. And obviously you can check us out here on the Canon. Like I said, coming to your feed every Wednesday. We will be back next week with another essential movie. We're going to be jumping forward in time a little bit, about 70 years, but talking about another great movie, The Matrix. Can't wait.
Oh, yeah.
Got the Shawns coming back for that one. Can't wait. Should be another amazing episode. I hope to see you there. And in the meantime, I will see you in the wasteland. And Seth, thanks again.
Thanks again for having me, man.